As else know, but here's the kicker: when I messaged you, exactly the same kind of weird. Wait, he replied. What do I do now? Because now I've got to ask you questions and not annoy you, which is always
Well,
the danger with this sort of thing.
well, everyone annoys me anyway. But it's you know, I have a weird philosophy with the with doing podcasts, and I guess now they're called podcasts. What were they? Internet radio back when I started doing them in like
Yeah.
2000 whatever. But I didn't. I know people that only do like the biggest podcasts and stuff, and as long as you're relevant and as the talent, you are uh, like a first-rate name for them, then that's great. But guess what? When you need them someday, when you're not the first-rate name, they may not respond to you. Whereas if you do podcasts of all levels, all different sizes, you kind of endear yourself to the whole medium.
Mm.
You know, like there are guys that I still do. Occasionally, I'll do their podcast like once a year or once every other year. They were, I don't know if they had 5 listeners when they started back in like 2010 or whatever, but we were starting Kayfabe Commentaries, and I wanted to make digital friends with as many people as I could. And my philosophy was always that if it doesn't have to be a big show to be a good interview.
Sure, 100%. I completely agree with that. Although sometimes it does help if it's a big show, because that helps make a big interview, as opposed to, coming on and saying, "Oh, so I see you've got your own Buddha set, and it's a lovely set of wardrobes. I'm sure IKEA was doing a sale that day." You know what I mean? Like, it does help the present. Like, I've seen your digs. Your digs are massively improved from some of the interviews I've seen. If only because, God bless you, watching one of your interviews, I was inclined to say, dude, I'll let you out of your box. Just come closer, let me out, and then I can breathe, I can stand, I can stretch my neck. Because
Yeah.
you seem quite cramped in the interview that I saw you with. So I imagine you were just sort of making do with the setup that you had at the time, and
Which I don't
trying
know
to.
which one was it. I don't remember.
Oh, this is all I remember is that the guys, I think it's KW, something along those lines, but he had you sort of set like side by side like this, so it looked like at any given moment you were going to start. This has always been meant to
Yeah.
be. And it also didn't help the fact that I think he probably directed you to do that because you were kind of giving it this sort of business. And I've always been like, why are you not doing more to make the guest feel comfortable in that situation? Give him a second and
Yeah.
say, listen, the shot's not great. I don't want to make you look bad. Just take a second to rejig it and we'll be fine.
Right. Yeah. Not everybody has the production acumen either, you know.
Mm.
They know how to log into a website and talk and upload a file, but the aesthetic, there are some people that just don't consider it. When we started Kayfabe Commentaries, you're clearly a younger guy than me, but the shoot interview world at that time was a static shot about here to here of somebody's head sitting on a couch. Lighting wasn't given much of a consideration other than on and off. External microphone wasn't used, so the ambient noise in the room sometimes would drown out wrestlers. So the production aesthetic and the production quality was of utmost importance to us. And I think that's probably one of the contributing factors early on that made us so popular. We were very different than what the other shoot interviews looked like.
100%.
Now it's
And
a little easier to get the equipment and stuff, and it's not as expensive. So I think more people are paying attention. But clearly, as you're mentioning, not everybody.
not everyone, but then again, that to my mind at least, that just comes from this a lack of understanding about what you're doing, which is I mean, and you've embodied this. I've read a couple of quotes from you, and I think you stem from the same mentality, which is it's about what the audience wants, and you need to understand and identify with what they maybe want and are not currently receiving, or they receive and could be it could be elaborated on, it could be streamlined, it could be just diversified. Because you mentioned in not wanting to do podcasts and interview that you didn't want to do the same thing, and you certainly didn't want to produce something that had a laggard feel. So that speaks to this idea that Well, before I set off making something I want to make sure that what I'm making is what people want. And that's something that I don't necessarily see in a lot of creators. A lot of creators want to emulate what someone else does to be that person for their own personal gratification, as opposed to, well, I'm in this because I want to satisfy an audience. Like, they're the ones who are ultimately going to pay attention to me. So I've got to start from that foundation. I mean, or am I wrong in that assessment?
No, the best shows and the best interviews and the best companies, the host position should be a fan's position. When I would sit down with a guest, I would be in very dangerous territory if my goal when I sat down with Eric Bischoff or Jim Cornette and the cameras rolled would be for me to sit with that guest and educate the viewer. That would be a miss, because it would start to feel like a classroom a little bit. What should happen is I should be, and then the best interviews that I did with Kayfabe, I was sitting there as a fan, losing myself, losing my director's head a little bit, and just sitting and being engaged by Roddy Piper or whoever it was, and asking them the questions that I wanted to know as a smart fan. And in doing that, I've delivered the audience, who are thousands of Sean Olivers, exactly what they want, because I sat there as a fan and asked those questions. So the viewer is sitting in my place when we conduct that interview. You can't go in wanting to educate or to do anything high concept. You really just have to go in as a fan. And it was harder when I had to cover eras that I wasn't a fan of, like the 2000s, well into the 2000s. You know, talking with some of the more contemporary talent was that was work for me. You know, I had to research, and whereas Piper or Nash or anybody, I could have just sat with and talked without a script for 2.5 hours easily.